Good afternoon. It is about 1:15 p.m. on Saturday the 9th of January 2021. After the madness that was 2020, we were sort of hoping for this year to be a little bit more sane. Now, my name is Arran Hunt. I'm a partner of Stace Hammond and I head up the Migration Partners team there. We're recording today's video actually just at my brother's place with a massive view of Rangitoto. I do love this house and I do love this view. This is a very important volcano mountain to us here in Auckland. Now, as always, this video shouldn't be taken as being legal advice. It's not legal advice. It is purely just our commentary on immigration changes here in New Zealand. If you're looking for legal advice, get in contact, talk to a lawyer, engage a lawyer. We need to hear more about what you're going through, your situation, before we can actually give advice. This is just our commentary. Now, there hasn't been any news released from the government in the past few weeks now, because New Zealand is still in its holiday period, that it is coming to an end for most people. Officially, my firm goes back on Monday with the skeleton crew. I've been working throughout the holidays, but it's sort of the end of that holiday period for most of the country. Now, Parliament is closed till the February the 9th. It is an extended break for our Parliament, but they still do work through this period. Government is still working. They are still doing their jobs. So we may still get some news or changes before February the 9th. But at the moment there is no changes to policy or to rules, so please do not ask about any particular visa saying is there a change, because my answer is going to be no. Watch the video. I'm happy to answer questions, but I do get a lot of questions saying has there been a change to this visa, and if there is, we'll let you know. But in the last few weeks, no changes to visas. Now, as always, we'll refer to the operational manual in this video, as we often do. Now, if you are new here, if we refer to a letter followed by a number, like H525, we're referring to, in that case, Section H, which is the Special Temporary Visa section, Subsection 5, which is the COVID-19 temporary visas, and Subsection 25, which is the determination of a visa or variation of conditions. We'll link to a number of these in the description, so you can get a link through to what we're actually referring to, the actual wording. The operational manual itself is the rules that Immigration New Zealand follow and apply. So if we're ever arguing a visa with Immigration New Zealand or in the court, we'll be making references to the operational manual and these codes. And we won't generally refer to a general web page on the Immigration New Zealand website. We're looking at the operational manual, which they call the instructions or the immigration instructions. There's an exception today, we'll come up to that soon, but generally the operational manuals are what count. So today we're talking about the Partners of Critical Health Workers. Now, as most of you will know, there is an allowance under H525.1 to allow for a border exception for critical health workers to enter New Zealand if they have a job, or for nurses to come into the country to do CAP booked before 31st of March. Now, under H525.15a, this also allows the people coming to New Zealand to bring in their partner-independent children. And as an interesting point, it also means that the partner in that don't have to travel with the critical health worker. They can come in on their own. It doesn't require them to travel with them, which is an important point sort of coming up later. Now, we've been asked several times by people who have already working in that health sector about how to bring in their partners. Now, as we saw a way, of course, for partners of new health workers to come into the country, we're looking for a way for health workers who are already in the country to bring their partners in. The issue has always been about the operational manual, in particular H5, which is written for a situation which New Zealand has never been through before. You know, it's been a century since we had the last mass pandemic, and we didn't really have immigration rules back then. It was, you know, the 1910s. So it's very much been law made very quickly, and with law made very quickly, it often means that things have been overlooked. You know, they brought it through. Well, had a few months to do it, but brought through relatively quickly, and there's a few issues in there, a few inconsistencies. For example, H531A talks about a critical health worker as being a person who will be working in New Zealand, so future tense. However, and I'm going to break my rules here about referring to a website, not the operational manual, but the INZ website, which we'll refer to, talks about a critical health worker as being a current or new health or disability worker. So it's both future tense and current workers. So it includes both those situations, those coming in in the future and those who are already here. Of course, there is a defined list as to who a critical health worker is. We'll link to that in the description to make sure that you're definitely on that list. So now at the same time, there is an allowance under H5 3035 for essential skills work visas to have been outside New Zealand to re-enter the country, but they have to have left before 9th of October. So that's not going to cover those who leave after that point. So it's sort of, there's a bit of overlap of areas there, and it's, at first glance it looked like it could cover them, it might not. We weren't so sure, so we did seek clarity and guidance from immigration. We spoke to one of their senior staff there who's in charge of the border control, and he replied with the following, which thank you to Dave for that. The partners and dependent children of people who have been granted a visa as a critical health worker qualify for a border exception. So that's what we knew, people who apply for a border exception and that critical health worker can bring in their partners and their families and that sort of thing. So here's the important bit. If a health worker currently in New Zealand who has not been granted a critical health worker because they were here before the border closed or applied for a visa while in New Zealand, went offshore, they could make a request for a critical health worker exception. If granted, their partner and any dependent children would also qualify for an exception. So Immigration New Zealand have confirmed that critical health workers who are in New Zealand have a way to bring their partners into the country. Now, it isn't the easiest way and has risks which we're going to run through, but at least there is a way. Now, I'm going to give a very general idea as to the process. We strongly recommend anyone looking to do this process to get legal advice, because if you don't do this right or you're not eligible to it, this could be a very expensive and hazardous, risky process to undertake. And we don't want to waste the trip and waste this money and waste what should be months out of the country. So, simplified process, this is very, very simplified. So first of all, you need to be certain that you're working in a position that falls under the definition of critical health worker. We'll provide a link to the Immigration New Zealand website on this, but definitely get legal advice to make sure you're covered. Also be certain that you can get the leave to actually do this process. You don't want to leave the country and have your employer go, hey, where have you gone? You can't take several months leave and the job is gone. Because the job is gone, you're no longer coming back to the country. So talk to your employer, let them know what's going on, the documents they have to provide for the process anyway, so let them know, and hopefully they're okay with this. And then get that leave from them, leave New Zealand, return to wherever your partner is and be with your partner. And then once you're back there, apply for the border exception as a critical health worker and include your partner and independents within that application. Now, it's important to make sure that your partnership meets the requirements seen by immigration as a partnership. Now, the definition of partner and dependent child is the same as those looking to come to New Zealand with a New Zealand citizen or resident, so it's relatively well known now over the last few months. E4.1 covers the what we call genuine and stable relationship test. Immigration New Zealand are also applying a live together test. It's not directly referred to in the H5 requirements, but they are applying that test that you must have lived together with your partner to be considered as being a partnership, and that is where most applications are falling over for partnership, is that living together requirement. And you need to provide evidence of that having lived together. Now, of course, if you've had several years with your partner, you've got children, that sort of thing, it's going to make it a lot easier because you have the evidence of having lived together and being in that longer term partnership. If it is your partner for a very shorter time, definitely get legal advice before you do the whole process to make sure that, well, just give you a better idea as to whether you're going to be able to get this visa or not, or it could be a wasted trip. Now, dependent children are much, much simpler. If any children under 18, as long as they aren't married, it's assumed they are dependent on the parents, being you and your partner, unless there's evidence to show otherwise. So you can basically say, this is my child. They could ask for a birth certificate, possibly to show that you are the parent. Otherwise, they should assume that it is your dependent child. Now, if they are 18 or 19, they have to be single, they have no children of their own, and be substantially or totally reliant on you or your partner. Now that could mean living somewhere else, if perhaps studying at a university or studying somewhere else, but they have to be basically, you have to be paying their way or substantially paying their way and looking after them. That will require evidence to show that reliance. Now, as with most border exceptions, it is a two-step process. First is the EOI, the expression of interest, which is made through a website. We'll link to that. These are getting done in a couple of days. This is this first easy step. Once that's processed, you'll get an invitation to apply an ITA, which will allow you to apply the actual visa itself. That's the actual application step, which is done through the immigration IMS, they call it. That's taking, if it's about the same as the other visas we're seeing going through, it's about a month. So all up, you're looking at sort of 4 to 6 weeks for the entire process. Now, at that point, if the requirements are met, visas will be granted, and then you can look at booking your flights back to New Zealand. Now, of course, you're probably aware of this, but flights into New Zealand must be met with a pre-arranged managed isolation date, MIQ date. Now, I checked this morning, and January, February, and March are all fully booked for MIQ currently, and April cannot be booked yet. So you're generally looking for at least 3 months, or probably about 3 months once April opens up, out of the country if you were to leave. Now, there is the occasional date being opened up as people cancel MIQ, and one of the guys is sitting there looking and refreshing the page looking for ones popping up, but generally it is fully booked until the end of March currently. So you're looking at probably at least 3 months out of the country, hence the issue with the leave. Also, there's also a cost for MIQ for you and for your partner and children, and of course the cost of flights, and of course the risk of catching COVID while overseas. So there is a way for critical health workers to bring their partners into New Zealand, and it's a way being used by residents and citizens where the partners can come for a visa away the country. They're in the exact same process. They're calling it a fetch, and it's being done by a lot of people, so you won't be alone in doing this. But it really isn't an ideal way. It means that New Zealand will be without your or critical health workers' experience for at least 3 months, which means more load on the other workers in their area, which is in very high demand areas. It means there's a chance of the person catching COVID-19 out of New Zealand. It means another spot in MIQ being taken up by a person as they return to New Zealand, so one fewer spot for those coming back to New Zealand, which further adds to the backlogs of people coming into the country. Now, we've raised this with Immigration New Zealand as well, who responded to our first email. The second email was saying, well, what's the point of that? Let the partners come in. We haven't got a response to that, which I understand, because this is not INZ policy, this is a government policy. Okay, so please don't get angry at Immigration New Zealand for these decisions. This is the government who has chosen this. Now, the government has decided that critical health workers in New Zealand who have worked in our hospitals through a global pandemic will have to leave the country to bring their partners in. At the same time, we had France a few weeks ago granting all of its migrant health workers citizenship. So 20th of December, the entire country, if you've worked through the pandemic and you're a migrant in our health service, you're now French, which I think is fantastic. Now, we aren't saying that New Zealand should be doing the same thing as France is doing, because France, COVID-19 has been an absolute horror. So they've gone through hell. But it does seem to be a ridiculous situation that our critical health workers have to leave the country to bring in their partners, while at the same time we're offering MIQ space to TV show hosts, or those coming to New Zealand for a single concert, to perform in a single concert. We are romantics here, I suppose, at Stace Hammond, but we think that those spots could be better served going to a partner of a critical health worker who has been going through great risk for our benefit. So hopefully this video has given at least some good news. It's given you some options as to how you can bring your partner into the country. It provides a path to bring them back into the country. But hopefully we're also calling on the government to change this, to acknowledge that the service that you have done for New Zealand during 2020, and to let your partners come into New Zealand without having to be collected. Those who are the partners of new applicants can come in on their own, so why can't your partners? We think that's very, very unfair of Immigration New Zealand. The current process means that New Zealand will be without your services for several months. It will cost you on flights in MIQ, it will cost New Zealand in MIQ, because your costs won't cover all the MIQ costs. And we'll just add to the load what is already a very overloaded isolation system. Now, we aren't asking for the government to give you citizenship. Now, that would be nice, but we're not asking for that. But we're asking for just a bit of logic, a bit of compassion, and a bit of gratitude to the work you've done through what has been a very scary time of 2020. And, well, we'll keep working on that. For now, you have an option there, but we're hoping that better options can be provided in the future. And that is it for today. We'll come back with changes as they happen. If anything in the future comes through, we'll let you know. We think there'll be a few more weeks of quietness before things start ticking over again, but if they happen, we'll let you know. Until then, kia kaha, stay safe,